Hello, this is Jim Sutton from Stone Tablet Innovations. Today we're going to move on to video blog number 4, which is installing the Espressif IoT development framework for the ESP32. So the goal of this video blog is to install the Espressif software environment on a Windows 10 computer. I'm actually using a fairly old desktop. So you might want to look at some of the earlier blogs, especially ESP32 as a platform, and making sure you have a clean install prior to this blog, which is installing the IoT development framework, pretty much putting all the software on that you need. I just want to add that there's a good write-up, and this video blog follows the steps outlined by Espressif. And here's the link. This will be in the notes as well for getting started with the Windows setup. One of the things that I'm doing here is I'm going to use the Espressif tools for building projects from C, and not use the Arduino stuff that some other people have been blogging about. And I just don't see where the Arduino development environment adds anything. I think it's more important to keep the code as clean as possible. And so I think you'll find that this is a pretty good way to go. So we're putting the tool chain to compile code for the ESP32. We're going to add in build tools, CMake and Ninja. And we're going to build a folder that contains all the software libraries and source code, along with the Python scripts to actually operate this tool chain. And we'll be adding in the text editor to write the programs, usually Atom or Eclipse. Atom's very simple, Eclipse is very big and complicated. So this is just showing that there's a toolchain environment where you build a project. Once you have the project, the software done, you can build it, and that means compiling it and linking everything together. And that then becomes a bootloaded application, which can be uploaded onto your development chip. And this is just a figure from Espressif. So here's just the overview of what we're going to do. We're going to use an automated installer from Espressif, and it's going to put all those things on. And the installer puts on the custom software from Espressif and Tensilica, as well as this OpenOCD. That's a hardware debugger that you can use to get a little bit closer into timings and other things on the chip. We're not going to use that right now. We will be using CMake and Ninja as the build tools. The installer can also download it and run and build Python 3.7 and Git for Windows if they're not already installed on your computer. And I think I've said a couple times, I just suggest you get rid of Git and Python. You probably have later versions, and there can be some compatibility issues. You're going to see that the build script is pretty involved, and it's just easier to let Espressif pull in the versions of Python and Git that it wants to use. Just repeating it, you can install all these pieces manually, and maybe some of you will, but my suggestion is use the tool first, run your first programs to prove everything works. Then if you want more customization of Git and the Python locations or versions, you can uninstall the IDF and do the manual install. So we're going to set up the software development environment and do the setup of the tools and the environment variables. But the good news is that the automated installer does most of the work here. So a couple of points before we get started. Watch that all the file folders you create or use don't contain spaces in the names. For example, if you want a folder named Stone Tablet, do it with the underscore, not the space, because the automated Python scripts don't work. And second, since you're going to be typing the folder names frequently, it makes sense to keep them short. So I think I use ESP as one of the short file names in here. So let's go, let's move, and I'm going to go ahead and install the Espressif IDF environment now. So I'm going to open my Chrome browser, and I've stored the link to this standard setup of toolchain for Windows. I provide that link in the write-up and in the PowerPoint. So when you get into this location, you can scroll down and find the ESP IDF tools installer that we're going to use. I just want to make sure you do look up, and in the URL, look for latest ESP, because I've seen it where you can get old versions by mistake. So when you click on this, it will download, I don't know, 300 megabytes. It took a little bit too long for the video, so I kind of pre-installed it into, I let it download into my downloads folder. But before I run it, I want to make sure I have a location to put it in under my username. So I want to make a new folder, and I'm just going to call this ESP. I think if you keep it a little shorter, you'll be happier when you're typing in the commands. So let's go back to downloads and run that installer. I'm going to accept the agreement. It needs Python 3.7 to run not only an installation, but when you run scripts, it calls Python. It's going to install Git. This is an older version. I did see some problems if you have a later version here. So if you provide a later version, you can run into problems with wheel files. So my suggestion is just let it use the one it wants. We're going to download this. This you might use for updates. And I like the master, the bleeding edge. It probably has more stuff in it that I can actually use, and it's also addressing bugs that are happening, and most of us are working on in the same area. So some of the development actions are very important to what I'm probably interested in. So I'm going to choose this file I just created, and so it also wants to put some tools in, so it's making a .expressive file, so that's no problem. And I want it to have these nice shortcuts for me, so here we go. It's telling me all the nice stuff it's going to do. So this is going to take a minute, and I may clip this installation here, but I tell you, this goes a heck of a lot faster than doing it yourself manually. And I think, as I suggested in the PowerPoint slides, it makes a lot more sense for the very first time that you go ahead and use the automated installer. Then you can play with some more custom installations later. There are just so many things that can go wrong, and it's so frustrating and difficult to find out what went wrong. I think you're better off with this method. They do have some nice places that Espressif has for getting support, and I'll put those in the in the notes as well. So right now we're running 3.7.3 for Python. I'm sure, yes, we're gonna let Git make some changes. Um, this Ming uh, is being put on right now. That's important, and we'll be adding the compilers from uh, Extensa. So again, this is saving you a lot of work. Now, if you want to undo this later on, which is not a bad idea sometimes, the uninstall takes all this stuff off too. So it's a really pretty nice script. So right now you see it's gone up to the GitHub and is pulling down the latest from the ESP IDF repository. Let's make that a little bit bigger here. I guess Zoom doesn't work on this window. So when you do this yourself, I don't think it's completely wasted time to see how long it actually happens in real time. Here comes the Tensilica Extensa compilers. I'm probably going to edit out a little bit here because it's taking a little longer than I want you to wait for. Okay, I've skipped a little bit here. It's still installing the Extensa GCC compilers, and um, now, what are we doing now? We're into CMake, which is a really cool tool. We'll talk about more in later tutorials, and Ninja. So it's going well here. So it's handling a lot of the packages right now with Windows curses. Now it's building the PowerShell where we'll be able to, um, when we click on it, it'll open up the right environment to uh, run the IDF, the new framework we're doing. It is interesting that it is, all right, it finished, and there we go. So at this point, it is completed installing the IDF, and we're now ready to build a project. Let's just take a quick look at where some of the files are. And so it's added a .expressif file here with lots of tools and Python environments. And under ESP, it has an examples folder which we're going to go into, as well as some tools here. And so that's good. Let's just shrink this. And it's also added a command prompt that just going to close that one. Whenever we launch it, it will do all the right path variables so that we can build projects. So we'll be working in this kind of environment in some of the next tutorials. But that's it for using the Espressif command to do the one-step installation. And you can see it worked pretty easily. If you did want to undo this, let's see, you could do add or remove programs. I think I mentioned this, but this we could just uninstall it from here, and so that's no big deal. Well, so on to the next step. Well, thank you for listening in to this video blog on installing the Espressif IDF environment. We're going to move into running some examples in the next tutorial. Please don't hesitate to subscribe to this channel or email in some questions. Thanks and goodbye.